Do you have a favourite simile or metaphor from a book, a poem, or a novel? And why do we like similes and metaphors so much? How do they make whatever we're reading that much more vivid and relatable? In this video, I'm going to show you 5 of my favourite metaphors and similes from poets from ancient Greece and ancient Rome all the way up to more modern poets, the French poets Mallarmé and Victor Hugo. My name is Harry. I'm an Oxford-educated classicist, writer, broadcaster, educator. Maybe you've seen some of my shorter videos, my reels on Instagram, YouTube and TikTok, Harry's Poetry. Let's look at the first couple of metaphors. The first couple of metaphors that I'm going to speak about are taken from Homer's works, the Odyssey and the Iliad. What are these about? I'll make more videos hopefully in the future speaking about the Iliad and the Odyssey, but these two works are about the Trojan War. This was a mythical war fought in Troy, modern-day Çanakkale in Turkey, between the Trojans who lived there, and they were invaded by a united front of Greek city-states in response to one of the Trojan princes, Paris, abducting Helen, who was the wife of Menelaus, an important Greek king. And apparently this Trojan War did take place, not probably as literally and mythologically as in Homer, but archaeology shows that there was a city in Troy and it fell a few times, which is very interesting. And the Iliad is about a moment in this 10-year war. In the 9th year, it follows the consequences of the anger of Achilles, the super soldier in the Greek army, when he falls out with the commander-in-chief, Agamemnon. And there's a lot of loss of life, and Achilles loses his best friend and slaughters the best soldier in the Trojan army, Hector. It's a really beautiful tale of human nature, surrounded, enclosed in the context of a great war. And of course human emotions, the character of people, come out even more strongly and fiercely in this context. And the Odyssey, this is related to the Trojan War, but it's the after effect. In the Odyssey there's the epilogue of the Trojan War, Achilles' funeral, and it's about the return journey, a 10-year return journey of one of the great Greek soldiers, Odysseus. And of course he has an amazing journey fighting against the Cyclops, the Sirens, Scylla and Charybdis, Circe and Calypso, two great tempting female deities, and eventually he gets back home to his wife and son in Ithaca. In fact, the two metaphors I'm going to read to you from these texts both feature and are about Odysseus, and Odysseus, of course, is the greatest orator, the greatest speaker in ancient times, in the Greek army, and from anyone in the Trojan army as well. And so it makes sense that the metaphors and similes, things we use to make narrative more vivid and exciting, come and are related to Odysseus. The first metaphor I'm going to speak about is from the Iliad, and this is from book 3, early on, when there's a break in the fighting, and Helen of Troy, who's weaving a great tapestry in one of the rooms in the Trojan citadel, in the king's palace, is asked to come out on top of the walls and speak with Priam and the elders. And so they're out there watching the fighting, and she comes up and talks to them and shows them which Greek soldier is which. It's a really beautiful moment. She points out the best soldiers, and it's an interesting narrative technique to give a different view on what's going on from above. And there's a Greek term, I've forgotten it, I'll show it on the screen, of the narrative technique of describing the action from standing on the wall. Priam asks who a particular man is, and Helen says, "This is Odysseus," and she says many great things about him. They are quite close. In fact, when Troy eventually falls and Helen is taken back, Menelaus is helped by Odysseus. Menelaus and Odysseus are best friends, really. And so Helen recognises Odysseus and is quite fond of him. And then one of the Greek elders, a chap called, I believe it's Antenor. Yes, Antenor. Antenor recalls a time before the Trojan War when Odysseus came with another comrade, it might have been Menelaus, on a diplomatic mission to try and get Helen back before military action was taken. And, I mean, Odysseus speaks, Menelaus and Odysseus speak, I think it's Menelaus. He speaks from the speaker's podium, and they think, oh, he's a bit strange, why is he looking like that? But then, when he speaks, it's such an amazing occasion because Odysseus is such a fantastic speaker. And the simile is really lovely. So you would have taken him for some surly or simply stupid fellow, this is Odysseus, before he begins speaking. But when he liberated that great voice from his chest and poured out words like the snows of winter, there was no man alive who could compete with him. In ancient Greek, the metaphor is literally epea niphidesin eokota kemereesin, and this literally means Odysseus spoke pouring out like wintry snowflakes. And so it's a bit different But I like this idea of snowflakes, wintry snowflakes, because it shows, and I'm not sure if the Greeks were aware of this, let me know if you think they were in the comments, of the shape of a snowflake. I know each one is individual, and at least in our own modern conception of snowflakes, we have the idea that every word that Odysseus was said and spoke was unique and chosen specifically for a particular effect. So I believe that's really, really lovely. And the next metaphor I'm going to look at now is from the Odyssey. It's from a moment where Odysseus arrives. It's another nature metaphor. He arrives on the island of Scheria. This is the kingdom of the Phaeacians. This is right before Odysseus gets back to Ithaca, and he's there, and he tells the Phaeacians his story and his travels. Of course, the Odyssey begins in medias res, right in the middle of the action, and it doesn't begin with his first travel from leaving Troy. No, and therefore it makes it really easy, I would argue, to write a script about it. But Odysseus is telling the Phaeacian king Alcinous and his wife Arete about what he's been up to. And he says the first thing he did after he left Ilium was raid and sack another city. And this was a city inhabited by the Cicones. The Cicones, they're a tribe of Thracians on Ismarus near Troy, and they were allied to Troy in the war. And he does this. Odysseus raids the Cicones, and he sacks the city, gets their gold, gets their women, kills many of their men, and they're getting ready to go when suddenly more Cicones arrive, and reinforcements come, and they appear angry, fighting, and it's a sudden appearance of many, many troops. And the metaphor is this. It's where is it? It is. I'm like, yeah, okay, here, it's just here. At dawn they were on us, thick as the leaves and flowers in spring, and disaster sent by Zeus to make us suffer overtook my doomed companions and me. I love this line, as many or thick as the leaves and flowers of spring. This is so lovely because it gives us the idea not only of how quickly they appeared, but also just how many, like buds on spring when they appear on the leaves when the seasons change. In my group classes, which I run online, about the Odyssey and the Iliad, I have a person who's been in them for a long time, and she lives in Vienna, Austria, and she was telling me that this metaphor really, really struck with her, because in Vienna, when spring appears, suddenly there are buds on the trees, suddenly flowers appear. It's instantaneous. And so we can see Odysseus feeling the same thing when he sees these people. Just not only how many of them there are, but also how quickly they appear. Interestingly though, it's not a very frightening metaphor. Surely if you were telling a scary story, you'd want to make it a scary metaphor, like an animal like lions. And I think this is interesting about Odysseus because it almost seems quite appreciative of the beauty. It was a beautiful phenomenon to Odysseus, these troops arriving. And Odysseus is quite like a Jack Kerouacian figure, you could argue, being able to detach himself from the moment and instead detaching himself and watching it for what it is. He does this a lot in the Iliad when he's cornered alone and he's able to step outside and see what his best option is. He's quite mature in that way, and perhaps this is influenced by the fact that he's an amazing communicator. The next metaphor I'm going to speak about is now from ancient Rome. It's from the works of Virgil, and Virgil was the greatest poet in all of ancient Rome. He's arguably had one of the greatest impacts on all of European cultural development. The Renaissance was extremely important thanks to Virgil, greatly inspiring Dante and many other authors. He's most famous for his work, the Aeneid. The Aeneid is the great Roman national epic poem about Aeneas, one of the surviving Trojan elite, who, as Troy is falling down at the end of the Trojan War, he leads the surviving Trojans away from the city to found a new city. They have a big Odyssean journey and eventually arrive in Italy, where after a war they found the city which will go on in the future to become the city of Rome. Virgil also wrote a work called the Georgics, which is about farming, and a work called the Eclogues, which is about shepherds singing poetry together and speaking about love, and also woven in with the politics of land confiscations which happened during the civil wars. This metaphor that I'm going to read to you is very spiritual and mystical as well, which is very common in Virgil. There's a lot of spirituality, dreamlike images about Aeneas and about the Trojans, about war and many other things as well. This metaphor, this simile, takes place right at the end of the work in Book 12, when Aeneas, the Trojan leader, is about to kill and defeat Turnus, who's the leader of the Italians, the Rutulians. Turnus is handsome, he's tall, strong, a leader like Aeneas, and he's roused to madness by one of the Furies to fight against Aeneas, because Aeneas is threatening to take his role as the leader and as his right place to be the husband of Lavinia, who's the princess of Italy, of Latium, where Aeneas is. And it's quite sad, the Aeneid, really. A lot of people see it as a propaganda work of literature for the Emperor Augustus. And obviously there's the argument that you can see it in this way. But in reality, there are many, many books and articles, scholars talking about how Virgil's Aeneid constantly undercuts this idea of propaganda and instead speaks about the grief of founding the Roman race, how difficult it was, how much blood has been spilt, and how tragic it is in that sense, especially the loss of native Italian culture. Turnus, for example, symbolizing this, and there's many other hinted examples that this might be the case, that Augustus perhaps isn't such a good guy as you might think he is. And because of this, the Aeneid is divided into 12 books, 12 sections. You can see these as two tragedies. The first, book 1 to 6, the tragedy of Dido, the princess who Aeneas falls in love with in Carthage, and the next 6 books, the tragedy of Turnus, who Aeneas killed. Turnus is killed by Aeneas, but there's a massive build-up leading to his final moments. There's a steady drumming when we realise that he can't escape his fate. It's very similar in this regard to the Iliad, where there's a great increase in rhythm as we realise that Achilles is going to join the battle again, all the way up through his rampaging massacre and all the way to the death, the murdering of Hector. It's really beautiful, and it's what I think makes these epic poems so amazing to read, even 2,000 years plus since they were written. And I'm going to read to you now this metaphor. It takes place right when Turnus is killed. Turnus, he knows he's going to die, but he tries to fight Aeneas right up to the end. He lifts up a great rock to throw it, but he collapses under its weight, and there's a big groan from his troops. The simile says, "As in dreams when languid sleep weighs down our eyes at night, we seem to try in vain to follow our eager path and collapse helpless in the midst of our efforts. The tongue won't work, the usual strength is lacking from our limbs, and neither word nor voice will come." This is a very beautiful idea, and one which is very mystical and spiritual. The idea that we all know when we try and do something in our dreams, but we can't whistle. We want to run somewhere, but we can't move. But for Turnus, the dream has become real life. Dreams, of course, sleep is a god whose twin brother is death, and so it's by having this weird dreamlike moment right before his death, it's as if we're transitioning into that state now, and it's helpless and tragic because Turnus is so brave. And yeah, really, really beautiful idea, and very haunting right at the end. It slows the tension all the way down, it slows the action and makes it very thought-provoking right before he's killed. And in the Aeneid, there are many metaphors which are about dreams. There's a great one when Anchises, when Aeneas tries to hug his father in the underworld, the ghost of his father in book 6, and he tries to hug his father, but his father's a ghost, so he can't. And the Latin here, I believe, is, it's par leribus ventis volucrique similima somno. So the idea of being light as the breeze is similar to sleep. In that sense, him trying to hug his father. People also argue, the last thing I'll say before we go on to the next metaphor, a more modern one, is that in the Aeneid, book 6, some scholars argue, not very followed by all scholars, that book 6, Aeneas is just having a dream. He doesn't actually go down to the underworld. What do you think? For the last two metaphors, we're going to look at the French poets, Victor Hugo and Stéphane Mallarmé, particularly how they describe the sun as it's setting or rising and the light go through the clouds in the sky. And they describe it in a very, very beautiful way. I'm going to begin with Mallarmé from his poem Les Fenêtres. This is a beautiful poem, and it's quite easy to understand. A lot of Mallarmé's poems, compared with someone such as Baudelaire or Victor Hugo, Mallarmé's poems are extremely difficult to understand. The words are all over the place and can mean lots of different things, so they're quite hard to read. This one I really enjoy. It's about an old man. I think he's old. He's dying in a hospital bed, and he's not very fond of life, but he sees the sun coming through his window, and he presses his face to it. He gets out of bed and presses his face to it, and is in ecstasy looking at the beautiful glow of the sun through the window and how it rejuvenates him and gives him life. It's a poem about creativity, the artist taking abundance from nature, the beauty inherent in nature, how it's inspiring to all of us. And I love this description of seeing the beautiful clouds, the golden clouds. I'll read it to you now. I'm using my laptop. I haven't memorized it. It's son œil à l'horizon de lumière gorgée, voit des galères d'or, belles comme des cygnes, sur un fleuve de pourpre et de parfum dormir, en berçant l'éclair fauve et riche de leurs lignes, dans un grand nonchaloir chargé de souvenirs. I put the English above, of course. I love the idea of des galères d'or, belles comme des cygnes. It's really mystical and spiritual and relaxing, and you can sense the beauty and the adventure present in that sky, very reminiscent perhaps of the adventurous feeling in Tennyson's work, of course, Ulysses, one of my favourite poems, which I'll look at in another video. And a similar poem to this, which inspires a similar talking of the sky, is in Victor Hugo's poem Demain de l'Aube, which is a poem about his pilgrimage, his journey walking from dawn to dusk to go and lay some flowers on the tomb of his daughter Leopoldine. Leopoldine Hugo tragically passed away with her husband. They drowned in the Seine in the little village of Villequier. And so Victor Hugo would visit it a lot, and it gave him a lot of passion. In his work Les Contemplations, his poetry book, which is quite a descent to hell and back up again, it's 6 books. It works through his feelings, not a literal catabasis like in the Aeneid, but an emotional descent to hell and rising up again and creating beautiful art. And the death of his daughter made him write very beautiful poetry. There are some very beautiful lines describing the sky in this poem. Notably, he says, "Je ne regarderai ni l'or du soir qui tombe, ni les voiles au loin descendant vers Harfleur." And I love this, the gold of the evening sky. You know, it's so, so beautiful and very reminiscent of Mallarmé. And of course, Victor Hugo, remembered as an author of the work Les Miserables, but above all, a poet. And this is my video about metaphors. Let me know your favourite metaphor from a book or poem in the comments, and please subscribe if you want to watch more videos, or follow me on Instagram and TikTok. And thank you for watching. Have a lovely day.